Awesome. Great. So we can go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. We are so close to spring. However, it is a bit foggy of a day here in San Francisco. I hope everyone is doing well. And thank you for joining today. We're going to go ahead and get started. And Ray, if you would like to go ahead and share your screen, actually.
Problem.
Cool. So we have a mixed audience today with people from finance, accounting, product managers, and IT systems. And we're so happy to have you because all these stakeholders are involved in a company's growth, particularly when you're scaling, going IPO, or you're releasing new product lines. So growth is necessary, but it often drains IT's resources more than you would anticipate. So we are excited to have this tailored demo to talk more about these initiatives, drivers, and of course, stakeholders that are present on this call, and also give you an introduction to our revenue platform. So to get us started, we are going to go over some housekeeping items. So you will be muted for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions, you will be able to ask in the Q&A below. And of course, the session is being recorded, but we ask if you would like a recording to request it. So I'm Kate and I lead marketing here at Leapfin. And if you have any questions again, or want to request a recording, you can email me at marketing@leapfin.com. And of course, we have Ray Lau here today, who's our CEO and co-founder, and who will be giving you the demo. And with that said, I will pass that off to you, Ray.
Hey everyone, thank you all for joining. As Kay said, I'm Ray. I'm the founder and CEO of Leapfin. Before I founded Leapfin, I was managing finance operations at Zynga. And frankly, a lot of the challenges that we dealt with at Zynga, we went through the massive hyper growth stage of the business, or the inspiration behind Leapfin, which very excited to show you guys and share a little more. Also, we have a live demo, prep for today, so we can definitely kind of dive in a little deeper. Feel free to start submitting questions through the throughout the webinar, and we'll try to answer all of them. But if we cannot to get to all of them, of course, we'll get to you, by the end, separately and individually. Wonderful. So for today, we actually have we're doing something a little more unique today because we have quite a bit of a mixture of both IT and finance and accounting folks on the line today. What we actually want to do today is actually kind of talk about this complex interdependency between both finance and the IT system folks, because we don't think about it, but frankly, they affect each other so much. And we want to talk about how can you alleviate some of the challenges between the two, and also, frankly, help how Leapfin may potentially fit into the overall ecosystem. So for today, for our agenda, we're going to first talk about what are some of the most common growth initiatives that we see at Leapfin that the business undertake, but has a tremendous amount of impact to actually IT and business systems. And also, the IT systems, like what are some of the common challenges that we see that could put a strain on finance as well. Then we can talk a bit about Leapfin and also jump into the demo, and of course, Q&A right afterwards. So to start, we see quite a few, some of the most common growth initiatives that we see today among our customer base that usually actually put a tremendous amount of strain on both IT and financial system folks. So what are they, right? The three that we commonly see are, number one is just generally expansion, business expansion. And that could come in the forms of just geographical expansion, market expansion, to international expansion. We don't normally think about why expanding to internationally or geolocations will put a strain, but what that typically means is that, well, as you grow internationally, you have to think about PSPs. You have to think about currencies and FX. You have to think about potentially tax reporting. Those are all things that actually finance and accounting will need from a financial system team in order to pull the information they will need for their processes. Second one is new product and channels. And that's also essentially a growth initiative that we see quite a lot. But what does that mean, right? It means that potentially the business want to experiment with new product launches, new business models, or potentially partnership channels. All of that also requires essentially new integration points, new data, and also potentially reporting requirements, especially if you are going through some kind of a partnership channel that you do rev share. Lastly, and which is also pretty common that we see is IPO readiness. So as the company get to that stage of the of maturity of a business, to get ready for an IPO event or SPAC, generally you will need very accurate and timely financials. Generally you want to be able to report your book will close by day 3 to day 5. And also SOX compliance becomes, critically important as well, right? So now let's talk a bit about how does all of these 3 things, for the finance folks on the line, you can all already probably thinking about, yeah, I will need better reporting. I needed to be able to report on all this. But I think the disconnect that we actually see quite a lot is how does that impact IT and engineering, right? So we call this the trickle-down effect, if you will. Essentially, what we mean by this is, these business initiatives that they are being driven top down as a company set goals. I'm sure you guys just went through your annual planning. All these business initiatives that are created to accelerate the growth of the business. That could be new product launch, international expansion, etc. But generally what that means is, well, then finance accounting is now know that we have this initiative that's happening. They will need a list of requirements around whether it's reporting or financial reporting in order to properly report revenue, right? Or properly measure the performance of these new initiatives in order to track whether are they are they worth investing further? Should we, maybe discontinue those investment? But generally, finance accounting will require a list of reports in order to basically satisfy both from a GAAP compliance perspective, but as well as management reporting. So generally, that has another trickle-down effect because from finance accounting, you're asking your data analyst or financial analyst to help create these reports. And the data analysts or financial analysts are generally pulling data from a bunch of different systems to satisfy that need. And it has another trickle-down effect, which is because the data analysts need to pull this data from somewhere, right? So the data engineering team is generally then are being tasked to maybe upgrade the internal data warehouses to track more data, or they need to somehow, transform these operational data into something that can satisfy the data analyst needs. But there's even further down, which is another trickle-down effect, which is when that happens, then the engineering team are being tasked to maybe create new integration points because maybe you now need data from the new PSP that's being used for the new market that you expand to, or potentially, now you need to track additional data because you launch a new product or you have a partnership, so you need data from your partners. So, it's a very kind of interrelated relationship between what finance need that trickles down all the way to IT, data analysts, data engineering, and overall engineering team. And I wanted to share this because, as Inga, I never really quite understood this dependency. And once I understood it, I have the appreciation on how much work this engineering IT team actually have to put into in order to satisfy these financial requirements and business initiatives. Now, that being said, but we also kind of see a lot of times internal systems that are built are difficult to satisfy these financial requirements because IT and data engineering and engineering teams they're generally building the product or data warehouses for customers, right? Or for product needs. And there's usually a few gaps that we constantly see that, a lot of our customer before Leapfin encounters. Number one is the complex integration points, which is some of our customers use 10 different payment processors, and they're also operating mobile like iOS and Android. And all these different integration points have very, very different data models and very, very different data schemas. So bringing all that data in and standardizing it, normalizing it is quite a bit of a challenge and as a very huge resource strain. Secondly, is data traceability, because for finance accounting, right, especially for those of you who are IPO bound, it's so important to be able to trace every journal entry that we report in a general ledger to the subledger, which essentially is Leapfin. I'm giving you a preview, but also be able to trace to every single transaction and make up of that number. And also then trace back to the source system. This type of traceability, it's something that it's quite difficult, and frankly, the engineering resource have to think a lot about upfront in order to kind of satisfy that requirement. Lastly is just get financial reporting. So in order to satisfy a lot of the requirements the finance accounting team may need, some of the new product launches or new business model that you may launch have very, very unique requirements, right? So if you're getting into subscription for the very first time, how do you properly recognize subscriptions? It's a challenge for that we see a lot. And IT team actually have to write those business logic in order to get a report that finance accounting need. So they almost have to learn accounting in a way to figure it out, bundling, SSP reallocation, how to figure it out mid-cycle adjustments and whatnot. So it's actually quite a bit of challenge. It's not actually just thinking about, we just can bring data into one place. So, as you kind of think about all these growth initiatives and you understand the strain that may be putting on IT, what should you actually be thinking about, as a system that you may need in order to satisfy all those requirements? There's a kind of, I would say, a few things that you definitely want to consider, right? To satisfy these growth initiatives, make sure that the finance and systems are not a blocker or inhibitor to the growth of the business. Number one is think about, hey, this ever-growing list of revenue sources that you may be dealing with. This list is not going to just be what you have today. As you grow, you're going to add more, you're going to add more, you're going to add more, especially if you're operating, in a credit card transactional world. There's just new PSP that you may have to be adding, or buy now, pay later systems, which is getting very, very popular today that you may be adding. So integration points is a key consideration that you may want to consider. Second one is, how can you, be flexible enough for not only the business models and channels that you're working with today, but also for the future. We actually see a lot that a lot of our customers that may start with subscription, but they introduce some kind of marketplace and transactional component to their business. We have some customers that start at more of a transactional business, but they want to introduce like an in-app purchase as well as some kind of a subscription component to their business. All of that is actually going to create constraints and strengths on your IT team. So something to think about, that you need a system that can do all of that. Third is, absolutely need to be compliant, right? So reporting, I kind of think of as financial reporting for GAAP, as well as management reporting for the finance executives. So think about how do you comply with the various requirements that you may need. And very lastly is there's just be able to satisfy the top three things that I just talked about. That's not enough, because there's end consumer that you have to ultimately serve. That could be, product teams, marketing teams, executives. So the data that's being managed, even though you can get it into one place and as well as do all this reporting, ultimately you got to make it into your ERP or data warehouses or BI solutions. So other, organization within a company can also consume those. So good news is, this ultimately is what Leapfin is. So to kind of give you guys a high-level overview of what Leapfin Revenue Platform is, one of my favorite quote from one of our customers is who was a VP of Finance and Operations at Mirror, which is part of Lululemon. he called us as a fully automated revenue subledger that you never know you needed. So I think it's a good way for you to think about what Leapfin does and where we reside. You can kind of think of us basically sitting in between all the various source systems and kind of the destinations, which will be your ERP, BI tools, or data warehouses. So what Leapfin does is we will ingest data from any kind of source system that have financial revenue impact. That could be billing systems, it could be payment processors, it could be mobile like iOS or Android, it could be entitlement systems or subscription management systems. What we do is kind of threefold, and we'll go into the details for the IT folks on the line. That we'll go into a couple of like key building blocks of how Leapfin works in a second. But ultimately what we do is we ingest data at the most granular and atomic level. And then we'll standardize the data, we'll connect the dots, and we'll normalize all that data into the most granular and atomic informations. We then have prepackaged business rules that could be applied on top of the sets of underlying sets of data, and we'll automatically create journal entries at the most granular level as well. We then roll up the information to a few different use cases that I can talk about. One is obviously pushing data back into your ERP. That could be NetSuite, Workday, Oracle, SAP, etc. And the frequency, some of our customers elect to be on a daily basis because they have planning software that sits on top of the ERP as a source of truth. So if we can push journal entries back into the ERP solution on a daily basis, they can then much more frequently do forecasting and planning, et cetera, mid-cycle adjustments. We can also push all the most granular data into your internal data warehouse. That could be a Snowflake or your BI tool, like a Looker. And because some of the use cases that we've seen from our customers is they want to be able to roll up data to do text reporting, for example. One of our customers, Canva, operating over 200 countries, and they need to be able to report recognized revenue by the various countries. So we can, provide you that data and help you kind of size that information. Another one of our customer, SeatGeek, it's a marketplace, ticket marketplace, so they want to be able to know, how's revenue by the various locations, Boston versus San Francisco versus New York. We can push that data to you and do that kind of analysis. Some kind of other potential use cases could be, product team want to do cohort analysis, for example. That's another, example that that you may want to consider. But in a nutshell, you can essentially think of Leapfin as a fully automated revenue subledger. That's probably the easiest way to think about what Leapfin does before we kind of move on. So before I dive into the technical details, wanted to actually kind of show you some of the customers that we work with. We've been incredibly fortunate to be working with some of the most leading brands in the market today, including Canva, Reddit, Vimeo, Guideline, and Greenlight, Flexport, et cetera. But one thing that you may notice is that we actually work with customers in all different industries and in all different type of business models. So as you can see that, some of our customers are more of a marketplace like SeatGeek. Some of our customers are subscription-based businesses like Canva and Vimeo. Some of our customers are transactional, and some of them are in-app purchases like a Reddit. So how are we actually able to satisfy the requirement for companies that have such different and unique business models in different industries? Is that's actually the core technology that we've built. So I'm going to go into a little bit of a more technical details. So for the IT and system folks on the line, so that you can kind of better understand the unique technologies that how we can easily work with companies in all different business model and all different industries. You can kind of think of Leapfin have 4 major building blocks. The first building block is basically revenue data integrations, which we'll talk about in a second. The second component, like everything highlighted in orange, is our data management aspect of Leapfin's building block. Third is our revenue accounting rule engine. which we'll talk about in a second. And then finally is the reporting and data sharing aspect of Leapfin. When we go into the demo later on, frankly, you will notice that solid 90% of what Leapfin does actually happen behind the scene. It's kind of beneath the iceberg, if you will. So what I want to do today is first cover a bit about all the technical components and how each of these building blocks work. And then we'll show you the final component in a demo. You can see exactly what Leapfin looks like in action. But overall, you can kind of think of this entire end-to-end process as it's a finance data pipeline. That's really what Leapfin is. All right. Let me go ahead and go into the first building block, which is our revenue data integration. By the way, we'll share these slides as SK mentioned. If you request them, we're happy to share this with you. So no need to take any notes or anything like that. There's a few things I will highlight. The integration points essentially is we're pre-built integrations into some of the most common, billing systems, payment processor, et cetera, that's out there. For example, Stripe, Braintree, et cetera, we all have pre-built. And there's a couple of things that I will kind of highlight. Number one is why Leapfin is very unique is that, one, we're able to track what we call differential deltas. And these are the things that I think a few of you guys may recognize as a challenge, right? So for example, number one, data may change over time. So for example, you have invoice that's issued at $10 this month. But maybe a few days later, for whatever reason, the invoice amount got changed, whether it's maybe the customer decided to change the order if you are kind of a e-commerce business, or potentially, the subscription business, someone decided to cancel and upgrade to something else. And maybe instead of $10, 2 days later become $5. That's a big accounting impact, obviously, and we need to track that separately. So Leapfin is almost like an immutable database that can track that over time. So that's one of the key things that we actually do. Second thing is on these pre-built integrations that I would like to highlight is because we know our partners very, very well, like Stripe and Braintree, we build our integration specifically for finance accounting use cases. We have some customer before Leapfin, they will use like an integration layer, like a Fivetran to bake data, but they always have inconsistency or reconciliation problems because they're like, why is the data that we get through Fivetran from Stripe into Leapfin is always not the same as what we are seeing from our report from Stripe? And we were able to quickly, when we see this, the main reason is because number one, Fivetran doesn't actually track some of these differential deltas that we just talked about, especially on the chargeback and dispute front. And because we know the integration very well, we actually really, really focus our integration effort to satisfy the finance accounting needs. There's a few other potential use cases, like, we actually have a customer who didn't realize that Braintree tracked refunds so differently, and they were overstating revenue because they were not tracking refund correctly from Braintree. So these are all kind of few things that I will highlight that that may be something to consider. All right. Secondly, I want to talk a bit about our data management aspect. One of the most unique things that Leapfin has built is what we call the graph data model, which I'll cover and show you in a second. As you guys know, bringing data into one place is just not good enough because that's essentially what's called a data lake, right? What you actually need to do is be able to link all that data into a single source of truth. You need to understand how everything affects each other. So one of the key things that enable Leapfin to be able to work with all different types of business models, whether subscription to marketplaces to in-app purchases, is our graph data model. This is highly configurable. We can actually build it uniquely to your individual business needs. And secondly, is 100% traceable and auditable, which we'll show you in the demo itself in a second. But what I want to kind of highlight in a bit is this graph data model. What does that mean? So this is a very, it's generic, but very, you can see that it's pretty common for a subscription-based business, right? Generally, you probably have data sitting in multiple different silos, data silos, that all have critical information. So in a subscription-based business, you probably have 4 different systems. You have a CRM that tracks all of your customers, right? You have a subscription or entitlement management system that manages all the different subscription plans and periods, et cetera. And most likely, you also have some kind of a billing system and payment processors to process all that data. So what Leapfin would do, is we can construct this graph that's completely unique and configurable by customer to basically map out and link all that data into one single source of truth. So what you see right now here is one single transaction. So we will actually kind of graph this out, in this level of detail for every single transaction. And then we, do that at massive scale. So if you have 100,000 transactions, we'll do this all automatically. Why is this so critical and important though? Is because even though this one single transaction may have this, this many different what we call nodes in this graph, it's important because as the transaction, goes through its journey, right? Every single one of these nodes actually have its very unique accounting impact that we absolutely have to track, essentially at that level of detail. So that way we can always be able to trace it back to what happened, to the source, and always ensure your numbers are 100% GAAP compliant, and also reconcile across the board across all different systems. All right. Now, I will highlight the next few things on a little faster pace, so we can actually show you the demo and show you what it looks like. The third part of Leapfin is our prepackaged rules. Essentially, we have over 20 plus years of experience on building all these accounting rules that we can basically just configure within Leapfin, to basically satisfy your 606 requirements. That could be amortization rule for subscription-based businesses. That could be handling disputes, chargebacks, refunds. How do you properly do these kind of adjustments? And also, maybe you have event-based recognition, like gift cards, for example. All these rules are basically pre-configured and pre-built that we can just configure to the need of your business, and automatically you'll get applied, and actually be able to, as the transaction traverse, we'll be able to apply those journal entry creation automatically. And finally, well, this is really where the UI component of Leapfin comes in, which we'll show you in the demo. Basically, once we do all this, we then roll it up into all the reports that you may need, whether it is journal entry reports that to be uploaded into your ERP systems, or it could be pre-bill management reporting rules reports for your management teams, or AR balance reports, aging reports. All those kind of things are all the reports and dashboard that we can kind of we'll show you them in a second. But most importantly, I would just highlight is that these level of data, all those things that we process, we can actually push it back into your data warehouses too. So, we can definitely share that information with you, so that way you can actually do any kind of analysis and aggregation on your own behalf. So just one final slide before we go into the actual demo itself. Really where we see a lot of our customer getting the most amount of value out of Leapfin is really 3 things. Number one is really accelerate the time to market, because many of our customers are similar to you all, that's rapidly growing, thinking about international expansions, thinking about partnership channels, thinking about introducing new business model or product lines. And by leveraging Leapfin, rather than the finance system team have to modify or write new codes or write new software, etc. In order to accommodate it, they just leverage Leapfin to add integration very quickly, configure just new rules so that all the reportings are automatically done. And also we have all the traceabilities that you need in order for IPO and SPAC readiness. That kind of goes into the second point that I was going to highlight, and I'll show you in a demo, which is we can trace every single summarized journal entries that you'll be recording in your ERP down to Leapfin, and also then trace it back to your source systems. So when we work with our customers and going through audits, they actually just open up Leapfin to the auditors, and auditors can directly use Leapfin for sampling or checking the source where all the data come from. And lastly is because Leapfin operates essentially real time, they will have all these on-demand reports and visibility to the business as well. And lastly is we really help reduce a lot of IT overheads as well, because as you guys could imagine, maintaining all the various integration points obviously takes a tremendous amount of effort. It's not just a one-time thing, but ongoing. We can help eliminate a lot of data migrations as well, since, as you guys may be considering going from one ERP system to the other, et cetera. So all those kind of things Leapfin could help with. And lastly, that most people don't think about is, as you go through SOX and audits, ITs generally need to be get involved to help provide data supports for the auditors, et cetera. With a lot of our customers, they really just leverage Leapfin for that. All right, I know we have gone through a tremendous amount of slides. I think it's better if we start showing you all the things that we've been talking about in the demo itself. But before we bring up the demo, if you have any questions, feel free to start submitting into the Q&A module, and we're happy to address those after walking through a quick demonstration of the product itself. So feel free to submit, and I will go ahead and get ready to switch gear here. All right. What you guys see, Ed, is the Leapfin UI. When you log in, you will see that something very familiar to you. It's kind of like an Excel-like UI. We did it on purpose. The main reason is, you can actually kind of see is there are 3 major sections, and all of these things that you see are highly configurable as well. You'll see on the top is this income, liabilities, assets. You can almost kind of think of like this dashboard, or what you see is kind of like a summarized view of the 3 financial statements that you generally have to work with. This is highly configurable. You will see the various drop downs that we can actually set up and configure for you. You'll also see that there's things on the left side, which is essentially the different chartered accounts that we can configure for you. And this is updated, every single day. So if you log in today, you will see basically data updated to this morning. So this is how real time Leapfin is be able to kind of bring in all that information. You can see this is almost as of today. You will see that there's a few different sections. There's like total recognized revenue, COGS, cost of sales, net income, liability, which help track deferred revenue, balances, ongoing revenue, which is credits, AR balance, cash, etc. We'll go into details of what all this means in a second. But what I want to do is talk a bit about like how Leapfin data flows into Leapfin. We'll kind of go along the building blocks that we've been talking about just a second ago. Let me go in here. Okay. So once we're bringing all that data into Leapfin, the first thing that we do is actually standardize all those data into, we call the financial records. These are basically the building blocks or components that will make up of all the the journal entries that we'll create. So in this example, in the demo environment here is a subscription-based business, and you will actually see this various object that we standardize: line item, invoices, fees, right, payments, settlements, refunds, chargeback or disputes, credits, You guys should all be pretty familiar with these various objects and financial records. Additional ones can also be created over time. So if you have specific needs, we can absolutely add them in here. But this is pretty standard that I would say most subscription-based business will have. Once we standardize all of this, so you can imagine, like if we bring in data from like 10 different source systems, you have 5 payment processor, including mobile, we'll standardize it all. So that way you never have to worry about, like, as you guys probably have experienced, pulling the various reports from different systems. They all say different things and all the dates mean different things. We standardize it also as a common language that you can use. But on top of that, let me click into one of them. You could actually see the link of the data. So remember the graph that we talked about, right? So you will see the section on the bottom called links. This is how we are basically building relationships. So if you have a subscription management system with a billing system and a payment processor, 3 different systems, we're linking on a transactional level on how all the data together. So for example, this is a chargeback that I just click into. A chargeback is usually against a payment. So you will see this payment right here. I can click into it and you will show me the payment. And a payment is usually against an invoice. So a payment that's assumed came from Stripe and an invoice could be issued from your billing system. I click on an invoice, you actually take me to where that data come from, which is from your original billing system and what that data represents. And you will see that this invoice, it's a $5 transaction, right? You will see all the line item associated with it because we want to recognize revenue individually for every single line. And you will, if there's any tax associated with it, you also see it here. And all the line items, I'll just click into one of those so that you can see what it looks like. It's a $5 invoice, right? Or it's a $5 line item rather. And it's actually a $5 monthly subscription. We will enrich this information from start date and end dates from the entitlement system. So if you are using some kind of a subscription management system like a Recurly or Zora or ChargeBee, Chargeify, et cetera, will automatically populate a start date, end date. And with our prepackaged rules, we can actually automatically create a recognition schedule that's associated with this line item. So I'll show you 2 things really quickly. One is the data itself, where we pull the data from. We actually have a very, very clear audit trail of where we pull all the data from. So you can actually trace it to this level of detail. But for the accounting and finance folks, you probably don't really care about this much. What you probably care more about is the journal entries. So we basically, our prepackaged rules essentially is translating all the data that we just show you, that's very messy, into something that's, that accounting and finance team can use. So in this example, it was a $5 subscription invoice monthly, right? So as soon as it was invoiced out, we'll automatically debit AR, credit defer. And because a portion of it, it's like I believe it was like a mid-November to December subscription. So a portion of it get recognized in the same month, and then the remaining amount basically get recognized in the following month. And the amount that get taken out of defer is automatically done as well. So all of this is automatically done and within Leapfin. So let me actually go into a more interesting one, which is the dispute that I was showing you. So let me kind of trace it back. See, I'm clicking on payments and I'm looking at a dispute, right? So dispute is very interesting because this often creates a ton of headache for a lot of our customers. The most common headache that we see is dispute actually changes status over time, right? So in this example, it was initiated back in November, but it didn't get resolved until actually February. It took 3 months, right? And it actually means very, very different things. So what Leapfin would do is we're continuously monitoring the status of this chargeback on the back end, and then we'll apply business logic against it. So what Leapfin is doing is that we're listening to the payment process, like, hey, what is this? What happened to this dispute? You got initiated. What happened? Did it get resolved? Is it successful? Is it not successful? We actually create this immutable data trail on what happened to this dispute. And in this example, we again translate that into the appropriate journal entries, right? This journal entry that's being created is, in this case, is as soon as it got initiated, we in the Stripe example, Stripe actually take money out of your account. So we would actually automatically debit non-deferred recognition and credit the Stripe wallet, which is essentially the money that Stripe is holding on your behalf. And we continue to listen and listen and listen to see what has changed. Is there anything that may, what happened to that dispute and chargeback? And in this case, 3 months later, the company actually won that chargeback. So Leapfin will actually reverse that journal entry back into the appropriate amount. So we do all of this so you can imagine that this one single transaction right here, I show you the line item, the recognition schedule to chargeback to payments. So there could be actually a handful of journal entries that get created for this one single transaction, and Leapfin actually do this for every single transaction that you have. This obviously, you don't want to be able to, doing this in the general ledger or ERP will be too much, especially for a lot of the businesses that dealing with millions of transactions. So what we do is we actually roll it all up into this, this journal entry report up here in a summary level. So with the millions of journal entries that we could be creating every single month for you, we can roll it up on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, whatever right cadence is, and then basically then post these journal entries back into your general ledger. So these are essentially what you will book. Whatever you see here should directly tie to what you book it within your ERP systems. But also, all the AR balances, Stripe wallet, et cetera, should directly tie to all the reports that you may see within, within the various, I guess, the payment report, settlement report that you get from your payment processors as well. So you'll have a direct reconciliation between your bank, your payment processors, as well as all the billing system that you may have. This is Leapfin in a nutshell. One thing I will highlight real quickly for the accounting folks, of course, Leapfin has a capability that you can also lock the numbers. We know that's critically important. Once you lock your numbers, we'll push all the adjustments to the most open period. So that way you don't ever have to worry about any number that already locked may change down the road. All right, this is Leapfin in a nutshell. What I want to do next is open it up for any kind of questions or that you guys may have. So, do we have any Q&As or any questions that I can answer for the group?
Yeah, we have a couple. Thank you so much, Ray. That was a great overview of our platform. So there was a few that happened during the slides. The first one was, you've talked about how a graph data model is unique to Leapfin. What's the value that it brings? And I think this person's referencing one of the previous slides.
Yeah, let me see if I can jump to that. I'm assuming is with reference to this financial record graph or graph data model. This is one of the most unique things that Leapfin does. And the reason why we employ a graph data model is because of flexibility. That's really probably what you want to think about. It's flexibility to fit the unique need of your business. So I'm sure a lot of you guys try to do something within NetSuite, for example, or force feed a lot of the data that you may have into NetSuite or Workday, et cetera. And frankly, a lot of our customers try to do that as well before they purchase Leapfin. But the problem they always encounter too is that NetSuite or Workday, they have a very predefined model, and you have to, and they may not support what you need. A very common one is NetSuite actually does not have a concept of a chargeback or dispute. So if it doesn't have a dispute, and we went through that uniqueness of that dispute in the demo itself, right? How do you handle that, right? So you can hack around it by using like a negative line item or something like that to represent it. But what happens if you actually get reversed back? So there's the downside of using something like a NetSuite and force feeding to the model is just doesn't really fit your need of your business. So the reason why we employ a graph data model is because we understand every business is slightly different. Different business model are very, very different. So, frankly, two subscription-based business can completely have different type of use cases. So we do a graph data model so that we can completely configure your most granular transaction specifically to your need. And we can, this is all through configuration, and we can configure this during implementation to exactly the way that how you need to see things and how you need to configure things.
Awesome. That was a great explanation. We have another question, which is also referencing a slide. I saw on the chart, there's an intelligent sequencing call out. Can you explain to me more about what that is?
Intelligent sequencing. I'm assuming you're probably talking about our rules engine, which is our prepackaged rules. So one of the key things that we have built in our rules engine is not just actually applying business logic against the underlying data. It actually needs to be done in the proper sequence. So for example, a chargeback can only be applied against something that has already been recognized, right? So when we create our rules engine, we actually have a lot of pre-built logic that's happening in the back end that will automatically figure out what's the right sequence in order to process the data. So the example that I just gave could be like a refund, right? Like refund and chargeback. Refund and chargeback logic cannot be done unless something has already been recognized or will be already processed. So, this kind of sequencing is very, 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 very important to be able to automatically figure it out. So one of the core technology that we have built is to be able to process the data at a proper sequence and a proper order so that appropriate journal entry is created automatically and accurately.
Awesome. Cool. And we just have one last question. So yeah, like Ray said, if you have any others, please put them in the Q&A, but if not, we can always end and you guys can email us. So last question we have is on slide 10, you mentioned the finance data pipeline. How do you ensure the security and integrity of this pipeline?
Yeah, great question. So we understand that because we serve finance and accounting teams and IT teams, data security, data integrity is always the top of mind. So we go through, we have very, very comprehensive SOC 1 and SOC 2 reports that we can absolutely share, which is ensuring the integrity of this pipeline and security of this pipeline. So those are things that we take very, very seriously internally. And we also have auditors that audit us to make sure that our data pipeline is secure and maintaining integrity. To put some ease in everyone's mind is, as you can see, we work with a lot of public company customers as well as high growth, late stage private companies that are planning to go public soon. So that's something we definitely take seriously and report we can absolutely share.
Awesome. Doesn't look like we have any more questions. So thank you so much, Ray, for talking about the problems all these different stakeholders face and giving an overview of the Leapfin revenue platform. I know this is just scratching the surface of the Leapfin product itself, and there's a lot more that we can double click into. So if anyone here wants to take a deeper dive, we will be having our sales team reach out to you directly to schedule any next steps that you see fit. Perhaps you want to schedule a demo with another member from your team, or to dig deeper in your current business initiatives and systems use cases. Like Ray said, there's so many different business models out there. So whatever that might be, we're happy to schedule something. So we'll be in touch. We will touch base with you shortly, and we hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.